It is Locked On Jazz for the 1st of April. No April Fool's jokes. I promise. The Jazz won. No April Fool's joke. The Jazz won with ball movement. Promise no April Fool's joke. And the Jazz beat the hated Lakers, which is totally awesome, even if they suck. It's all coming up, plus who runs and who doesn't, and a look at points gained with a week and a half left in the season. It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Pow, pow, pow.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Thank you very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen. Maybe today your first listen and a half. If you were part of that live show that just I had to bail out of. Hope everything's good for you. We're all good. Everything was fine. There was a delay. So the panic was unnecessary, but there was zero chance that I was going to be able to get through that show right there without at least making sure everything was all right. I got a text from my daughter asking about the start of the tournament that she was supposed to be in after the time of the tournament. So it was a little concerning. Hope everyone's good. Thank you very much. The Jazz won. By the way, kind of feels like every day I've started this week with a little Locked On note, right? So Wednesday was it was my 11th anniversary. Yesterday it was our biggest month ever. Thank you. Today, April 1st, we launched the next stage of Locked On, which is some city programming. And what I mean by that is in Atlanta today, we have launched 3 sports talk style shows, which will also include postcasts that you guys are used to. Again, I appreciate all you do. You're the guinea pigs for most of this by being a part of it. So there was a new little start, a new little addition to Locked On and what Locked On is. So if you're from Atlanta or you know somebody who's from Atlanta, let them know. And on Monday, we will be dropping another city, and I'll just tell you guys, it's Minnesota. So we will be launching 2 cities, and we'll continue to grow and grow, hopefully, as time goes on. So it's the next step, and exciting, and been a lot of work, and nerve-wracking, and a lot of juggling. So, but good. And hopefully it works. And hopefully we serve sports fan in a modern era with the next generation of sports talk in a manner that is more conducive than the old modern version of everything being live and on a radio, because the radios are changing and live is changing. So we're going to try to adapt to that with the new city shows in Atlanta and Minnesota, and then other cities shortly hereafter to follow. So, Minnesota is not a city, but St. Paul, Minneapolis is dual city. So that's called Minnesota. The other one's called Atlanta. I think you're all right. All right. Jazz win. Woohoo! I think that was needed. That's a bad basketball team. But it was a win with ball movement, which is nice. And, I think the stats on ball movement are really funky because they don't always, at least passes. If you run down the numbers every night on like when we have passes and when we don't have passes and things of that nature, it actually doesn't parlay to winning the way you would think it should. It's not, the team that throws the most passes is like in a game this year is the Detroit Pistons against I think in a game they lost. We threw our most passes in a December game against Charlotte, and then a game against Memphis and Minnesota. So it's, not clear. Charlotte, the way they play defense is clearly part of it because that's our first and fourth most passes in any game all season long. Miami's trapping early. But if you look at our most passes in games, you can see some trends, right? So if you look at our top 10 or 12 passes, a bunch of them are all from November and December when we actually thought the Jazz weren't moving the ball then, and we got to moving the ball less and less and less and less in the season started. If you look at our games with the most passes all season long, it's December 20th, January 28th, December 23rd, March 25th, the other night against Charlotte, November 25th, January 19th, November 4th, March 9th against Portland recently, November 13th, November 7th, November 29th. You get the point. And if you look at our games where we just literally didn't move the ball, you have recent games. You have at New York, against Sacramento, at Dallas, at Chicago, or home against Chicago. So 4 of our 5 games this year where we've thrown the fewest passes have all happened in the month of March, and 6 of our last 7 lowest passing totals have all happened since February 25th. And if I keep going, 7 of 9 have happened since February 25th. So it's, there's definitely something that's clear that, our ball movement, while it doesn't necessarily always parlay to winning, was on a downswing. And last night, it really felt as though, and I don't know what the stats say on last night, but last night, it really felt as though the ball finally pinged around a little bit. The numbers aren't as good. It's the middle of a pack game for us. It's actually probably pretty low. It was about a 280 pass game, according to NBA stats, I think is what it said. So, it wasn't like we didn't do anything exceptional. That's a kind of a middle of the pack game for us, but it felt really, really different. And the ball pinged around and through, and we had 25 assists last night, which is also somewhat of a funky number because, assists only happen if the ball goes in the basket. And it will be interesting to see whether or not we move the ball in the same way against the Warriors on Saturday night, who are really long, and the Grizzlies and the Suns, who are really active defensively. We should be Oklahoma City pretty active too, but they're not as good. And then Portland on the final game of the season, who knows? So I think that, that was the obvious thing, is that the ball move we played, with the Jazz, what the players call Jazz basketball. Frank Vogel said before the game, well, the Jazz, we all know the Jazz weaknesses is small and switchable. I don't actually think that that's true. When teams go small or switch the Jazz, it's a problem. So we're the best pick and roll team in the league at 1.02 points per pick and roll. We're the most switched, and we certainly slip. We go from 1.02 to 0.998. So there's definitely slippage there. And it's the least good of what we do offensively. We're still the 5th best pick and roll team in the league when people switch us. If you go over on a pick, we're the best. If you go under on a pick, we're 1.01. We're really good. And if you blitz the pick, we throttle you at 1.17. It's why people just don't blitz. Everyone wants to double team all the time. People don't do it because it doesn't work actually in the league. It's not even close on our numbers. And so that I don't think that's true. What I do think is true is we struggle with length. So switchable and long, then we have a really hard time moving the basketball. Long is the problem for us. It's not switching. We've got enough ball handlers. We've Jordan, Mike, Donovan, Bojan. We've got enough guys to make plays. So that when you switch us, I'm not buying Rudy can roll. But if you switch us and you're long and athletic, Toronto blitzes instead of switches, so we're fine with them. But that's the worst roster I could think of for us to play. Phoenix is pretty close. The new form Dallas, when they have Finney Smith and they have Dinwiddie and they have Bullock and they have Kleba all on the floor, isn't great either. So you look at that to me, and I hear that, and I think that that's it's a little bit of a misnomer out there. And I don't think that I really like Frank Vogel an awful lot, so I'm 100% giving him the benefit of the doubt because he's one of my coaches I've enjoyed talking to the most over my 20 years in the league. 30. It's really next year is my 30th year in the NBA. Crazy. I know it looks like it. I get it. But I think that when I see that, I hear that. I just kind of want to point out that I think that's a little bit of a misnomer. The play that jumps out to me in the whole game last night, it was an early Conley 3 where Bogey ran wide. Gobert sprinted the middle. Conley comes up in transition and shoots the early 6-second 3. Quinn Snyder talked about it in the presser last night that they chart how many threes they take in the first 6 seconds of the shot clock. So I promptly did the same after he said that last night. And it's interesting. So the Jazz without Bogey, for the 9 games they were without Bogey, they took 1 less early 3 a game. doesn't sound like that much, but it's a little bit of how we play, how we want to play, and what we like to do. There was one less open three a game, or one less early three a game. It just means you're not getting out and running as much as you'd want to. We were making it our effective field goal percentage as a team in those circumstances dropped about 6 percentage points. And so it gets subtle here, but when you look at it, what you're doing is you're suddenly, just shaving off offensive points to what your team does. And so that's what the Jazz want to do. They want to get out and run. And that's what was so obvious last night is the minute Bogey was back and even House, we started to run again. The numbers on us, by the way, it's interesting. So we don't run very much. We're 25th in the league in shots between 18 and 24 on the shot clock. So we don't get out and run anywhere near as much as we want to. We take 12 shots a game in that realm. 5.6 of them are threes. So 46.9% of our shots are threes. Our effective field goal percentage in those circumstances is 61.1, which is pretty good, right? So, our effective field goal percentage of any team in the league is 7th best in the NBA when we get out and run. We take the highest percentage of teams in the league with threes. We've totally changed. A year ago, no one was over 33%. Now Miami's at 42, Milwaukee's at 42, Minnesota runs to 3, Warriors run to 3. So there are a bunch of teams that did this. A year ago, this wasn't true at all in the league. This is a pretty big transformation in the league. A year ago, teams running for 3 in the first 6 seconds of the shot clock was basically Utah. And we took 3 51% of the time. And then Philadelphia, Portland, and Milwaukee were over 40, but the league average, the median team was Boston at 34.6. This year it's up. There's more teams doing it more, at least more teams committed to it early. I think the league average this year is 34.1. So it's not a dramatic difference. There's just more teams committed to it. And they're good, right? They're Utah, Miami, Milwaukee, Minnesota, Golden State, Orlando's committed to it, and they're just not good. Jamal Mosley's done a great job with that team. Then Dallas, Phoenix, Charlotte, Philadelphia, Atlanta. And if San Antonio makes the playoffs, San Antonio and Clippers, and then Denver, and then the Lakers. So the 14 top teams in the league who take a lot of threes in transition, 13 of them are playoff teams. It's kind of an interesting little note telling you how rosters are built. All right. I did have one concern last night, and we had a rotation change that we should talk about and see what everyone, what our thoughts are on that. And then when do we run and when do we not run? Who's on the floor? If we have time, I'm going to do a points gained as we kind of begin to wrap up the season. But if we don't get to it, it's actually not the biggest deal. It's not that big a change in week from last Friday. And next Friday is the one that I think resonates because it's getting close to the end of the season. Today's show is brought to you by betonline.net. With basketball going on in the final 4 teams on each side, will determine this year's national champion. You can get involved at betonline.net. It's your number one source for all betting needs, sports info, for all the latest odds, contests, player props, you name it. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your latest sports developments, including podcasts and reviews for all the leagues this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all sporting wagering information, including live betting, favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today to get your mobile device or learn about the trends. BetOnline, where the game starts. The big one tonight is Minnesota and the Denver Nuggets. I don't know who we're rooting for. I really don't. It really depends on whether you're trying to find a particular opponent in the playoffs, and whether I frankly just would like Minnesota. Let's avoid the catastrophe. Let's have Minnesota lose and really end any discussion. The last little piece of us not being 7th, which I think we've ended with the loss last night to Minnesota, and the rest. Denver's a 2.5 point favorite in that game. So keep on. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Murdoch Hyundai. So I got a story I got to tell. So we have 2 Santa Fe's, as I think I've shared. And my wife comes home the other day and says to me, the car just saved me an accident. I was like, what? She's like, I was getting off the freeway. We were in a line of cars. She's like, I don't know what happened. She's like, I don't know if I looked down or if I just didn't see it, but we were all kind of turning right. And then the car in front of me didn't go. And all of a sudden, she's like, I was going. She's like, all of a sudden, the car just completely stopped me. She's like, there's no question it was the car. She's like, I'm not sure I even hit anything. And so that was our, I always tell you that the Hyundai gets you all the bells and whistles and for the best price of the market. That was what our research showed. And we've got those cars because we thought we were going to do the regular thing where you give your 16-year-old kid a beater. And then we drove with our 16-year-old kids and they were terrible. So we bought them the car that peaked out in the most safety numbers, got us the most bells and whistles, and was not the most expensive. And so that was the Hyundai Santa Fe. It was nice that I had a good relationship with Blake because I just called him up. But I guess the car just saved my wife, not the kids. And those are the safety features that make Hyundai so great. And that's what it's all about. The Santa Fe is the one we have two of. The Palisades, just gorgeous if you're going for it. We also have got they've also got the Kona and the Tucson for you. I feel like saved my family an accident, my wife, like whatever, a bunch of bills. Like it's a we right now. And the Elantra won the North American Car of the Year. So it's all Murdoch Hyundai at 4646 South State Street. Also in Logan and in Linden. If you'd like to, feel free to email me. I'll just set you up with a direct meeting along the way. All right, so good win because we won, and I'm just not going to quibble at wins at this point. I didn't love the defensive numbers last night. 122 in the first quarter, 108 in the second quarter, 125 in the third quarter, and 104 in the fourth. Like that's not a good offensive team. So that's not ideal. I didn't love that. To be honest, that was kind of a bummer for us. I think the other, just to point that out, and if you look at the month of March, our defense ranks 14th in the NBA. Our offense ranks 11th. We're 8 and 9. I mean, we're not great in the month of March. But our defense ranks 14th in the NBA. Like there's just been some defensive slippage, and I don't think I saw something different last night. At some point, our personnel is what our personnel is. Hopefully, House helps us. Hopefully, get out and helps us. But we're just not. We're not great defensively right now, and to me, it's a little problematic. Bogey and House back. We just saw that contribution immediately last night. Bogey just spreading the floor. Bogey's not going to shoot well for 2 games. He never does. He's a total rhythm player. I've talked to him about this. I've talked about this multiple times. He's a completely rhythm, superstitious, like patterned player, and he has to rebuild his pattern. And so he went 1 of 6 tonight. He'll probably go 1 of 8 tomorrow or whatever, and then he'll just torch on next Tuesday. Because he is a rhythm player, and we've seen that before. He goes in and out of some things, and he has a comfort zone he's trying to create inside of his game and who he is. He's one of the more delightful guys to interview and be around, by the way. He's pretty quiet, but if you just watch him this year, when he came back, he missed a game and literally came back. I think it was 3 of his next 13, missed a game, was 2 of his next 12. Now is going to do the same thing. When he started the year this year, it was 2 of 6, 2 of 5, 1 of 5, 2 of 6, 2 of 6, 1 of 5, coming off the switching of balls from the European game to the American game. So whenever he's even just, he misses so little time. He came back from the All-Star break this year, if I remember correctly, and went 2 of 8 and then 1 of 5. Then before he went 4 of 7 and then eventually went 11 of 18 in a game. So that's just who Bogey is. House brought a little extra juice. He jumped that one passing lane and made that play. And that was kind of awesome. We don't see that a great deal from our club. And then the other, the other one I would say is we saw House just get in defensively. He's just not going to be intimidated. In fact, he is in fact the other way, an intimidator. There's some stories about House getting into people you want to go? There's a feeling, there's a little game inside this league. There's a few guys who you think just might go. If they get into you, you think they just might go. And then there's the guys they wouldn't. And the fact is that I think that House is one of those guys that you're not entirely sure if he's in your shorts and you shove him off and he comes back at you that he's going to stop. And we need that. there's a little bit of that to him, which is fun, and it's good for us to have that. The other one that was super interesting is that Quinn didn't play Rudy Gay last night, which there's a game he doesn't play for the Spurs in the final game of the regular season in the bubble against us. And there's a game where it says does not play in his game log, but he doesn't play the next few games after that. So this may have been a career first for him, but that is not easy for a player or a coach to get to the point where somebody ends up not, a veteran player of his caliber doesn't play for a game. Juancho Hernan-Gomez got the minutes instead. And I think there's an interesting little note that, Juancho does a lot of things well. He's not really great at anything. I mean, he's a good enough 39% corner three shooter, and he does things well. He plays hard. He rotates. He moves the ball. He actually got the blender going a bunch the other night. He defends without fouling. It's a lot of subtle things, but it's nothing remarkable. And so I thought Quinn's comment post-game was interesting. Our ceiling's higher in certain situations with Rudy Gay. So if someone's switching and we need a post up, you can go to Rudy Gay and get that little turnaround jumper. I actually thought Rudy Gay was beginning to play better recently, or at least the best he's played all year recently. So that's good. And I've said this whole time that when we signed Rudy Gay, the fact of the matter was that Rudy Gay's value is going to be playoff value. And we'll see whether or not we circle back with him. When he has played big power forwards, Marcus Morris the other night, he really plays great and brings something this team doesn't have, and does a lot of high value things in that circumstance. Juancho is just kind of assimilated well. Some of his statistical numbers are interesting. He's shooting 76% of his shots as threes. He's shooting 45% of those threes as corner threes, and he's made 47% of them so far. He's a career 40% corner three shooter. And if he can continue to do that for the Jazz, he does move the ball. He does play without fouling. Rudy Gay's been fouling at a really high level. And he does, I said this the other night, his energy is obvious. It probably shouldn't be, but his energy is obvious. When do we run and when do we not run? We'll look at that when we continue. Today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. Built. How many rappers do I have around me? 20% off site-wide right now. Your promo code's locked15, but frankly, 20% off is better. So go to Built.com and take advantage. The coconut marshmallow, the churro, the banana cream pie, the ruby chocolate. If you haven't been a part of the Puffs, go grab the Puffs. Also, caramel almond delight is still there. If you don't know about Built Bar, it's a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. It's 130 calories, 2.5 fat grams, 4 net carbs, 4 sugars, 6 grams of fiber, and 17 grams of protein. It was my halftime snack last night. It is often my halftime snack to get everything going. And it is Built Bar. Go check it out. Site-wide 20% off, but the promo code for the future is locked15. If you get a chance to mention where you've heard us, we'd still like some credit for that. That's all at Built.com. When do we run and when do we not run? I don't think we're getting to, just so you know, I don't think we're getting to points gained today. I thought this was really interesting. Quinn talks about running all the time. We don't run very much. I just showed you that we don't, we're in 24th in the league in shots in the final 6 seconds. So, but you can go to Cleaning the Glass, the website, really Ben Falk's masterpiece. And you can put in 5-man lineups and you can look at when we play in transition and when we don't. And you can also look at individual players. It's pretty interesting. So if we go to offensive play context and, on the offense and look at what lineups we have that run and what lineups we have that don't run, what you find is really the number one takeaway is we actually don't run very much when Mike Conley's on the floor, which I was surprised by. We ran almost none when Joe was on the floor. Our slowest lineups all kind of still have Joe on the floor, we don't run a lot when Rudy Gay is on the floor. So there might be some aspect to, what we're doing here with this is a little bit of trying to figure out how we're going to play more transition. So we're not in transition very much. In fact, we're in transition one of the least amount of any teams in the league at 13.8%. So for all of our talk about wanting to run, we don't do it a lot. Which is too bad. There's 2 ways to look at it. You can look at who we're in transition the most and then when we're in the half court the most. So let's start with, they're 2 different things, but we're in transition the most with Donovan Mitchell, Jordan Clarkson, Royce O'Neal, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Rudy Gobert. So you bring in Clarkson for Mike Conley, and that's by far and away the lineup that has actually played 100 possessions this year, at least 100 possessions. We have about 12 of them that's run the most. The next one is Donovan, Royce, Bojan, same thing with Hassan Whiteside and had Joe Ingles in it. That was the lineup where Joe ran with Donovan. The next one is that same exact group, Donovan, Jordan, Royce, Bojan, and Whiteside is our next. So Donovan, Jordan, Royce run. Royce runs. We used to run a lot with George Niang, and we don't, and that the bridge lineup used to be really, really good and run with that group. Our middle of the pack running lineup is our starting lineup, where we run a little bit when we start. And then we get into our lineups that just don't run. So Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, Royce O'Neal, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Hassan Whiteside almost never runs. Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson, Joe Ingles, Rudy Gay, Rudy Gobert. Obviously, that's not going to play anymore. Joe almost didn't run at all. Same lineup with Eric Paschall, almost didn't run. So there's our bridge lineup. We've been wondering what's wrong with our bridge lineup. And I think a little bit of what's wrong with our bridge lineup is it doesn't run anymore. You don't think of Bojan and George as runners, but frankly, they, in a lot of ways, they really were. That George actually ran the floor, got to that corner three early. We pushed ahead with that much talent, and we got those opportunities running. In fact, the lineup that ran the most for us last year was when Joe Ingles was playing point guard with Royce O'Neal, Bojan Bogdanovic, George Niang, and Rudy Gobert. And the lineup that ran the second most for us was the bridge lineup with Mia Oni instead of Joe Ingles. And the lineup that ran for us the fourth most was the bridge lineup. This year, the bridge lineup just hasn't run at all. And so you have to wonder whether maybe Juancho Hernangomez in that lineup with Danuel House now, a lineup we've seen almost none until last night, will be a lineup that actually can run a little bit. Juancho does get out and run the floor. House runs the floor. Donovan or Mike's got to run the floor. Mike's just not run very much this year. And so that's a key one to watch of whether or not that might ignite the bridge lineup. Our lineups that are in half court the least, it's kind of the same thing, but again, by far, Donovan, Jordan, Royce, Bojan, Rudy. And then that same exact lineup with Whiteside is in the half court the least. The same exact lineup, but you had Trent Forrest in for Jordan Clarkson, and they run. Then Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson, Danuel House, Rudy Gay, and Rudy Gobert actually got out of the half court a little bit. That's the bridge lineup with Rudy Gay. And now with Juancho Hernangomez, it will be interesting to see whether or not that lineup actually runs a little bit. The lineups that don't run this year, exactly what we talked about. The bridge lineup with Paschall didn't run at all. It was in the 10th percentile of plays that were in the half court. Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, starting lineup with Whiteside hasn't run this year. A few Joe Ingles lineups in there with Mike Conley. And then the last one would be our starting lineup but with Udoka Azubuike doesn't run a great deal. So, that's what we're looking at, that the Jazz need to get out and run a little bit more, and to run, maybe that lineup is going to be able to do it. All right, that is Locked On Jazz today. Hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us. Sorry for the false start for those who are part of it, and we'll talk to you soon. Hello, sir.